Thank you for coming along today. It's nice to see so many people interested. My name's Rebecca Trower and I work for Alzheimer's Society. I'm a dementia advisor and we work with anyone with any form of dementia, not just Alzheimer's, that can be a bit confusing for people, but any form of dementia we will work with. I have got some leaflets about my service, so if you want more information, take one of those. And in Trafford we also have a Singing for the Brain group. I'm just going to plug that while I'm here, and I've got lots of people. I've got flyers about that as well. Singing, very good for the brain, I have to say. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is spotting early signs, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our checklist for possible dementia symptoms. I'll also tell you a little bit about why it's important to get an early diagnosis or timely diagnosis. In fact, I think I'll start, and I'll do a little bit on what you can do to keep your brain healthy, because what we want to focus on is people managing their brain health as they would their heart health, so it's raising that awareness. I've displayed some of the flyers here that you can take, but I won't have enough for everyone. So I would suggest that you go onto our website, so it's alzheimers.org.uk, and you can order these leaflets or you can download them. So if you don't get your hands on one, you can order them. They're very useful. So, just let people in. Yeah, it's kind of a bit of squash in here. I think most people are aware that there's more than one kind of dementia. Alzheimer's is the most common, but there are over 100 different types of dementia, and basically whichever dementia you have, wherever it starts in the brain, there could be different symptoms. So although I think probably people are very aware of memory loss, and short-term memory especially, as being an indicator, there is a lot more to it than that. And some people will say to me, well, Mum's always been forgetful, so I didn't really think anything of it. But there's lots of other things to look out for. Our checklist is quite a useful thing to start with, really, if you do have some concerns. It lists everything that might be an indicator. So although memory loss is one, that there could be sort of word finding difficulties, so struggling to get the right word out, which happens to all of us, but it's when it's happening repeatedly. Repeating things, sort of, are the windows locked? Did we lock the door? But repeatedly is a clear sign. But also somebody may be out of character behaviour. So somebody who is always very good at managing appointments, managing their banking, suddenly there's the odd thing that you notice that they're not keeping up with that. Struggling to do tasks that maybe you've done automatically, like making a cup of tea, missing out some of the steps. So for example, I've heard people putting the tea bag into the kettle to make the drink. So getting confused about the steps, and that kind of trying to organise yourself could be a sign. Also mood change, so if you notice somebody who's normally quite level with their mood and suddenly they're having lots of ups and downs, getting very upset, irritated, angry, those kind of emotions are quite close to the surface with some of the dementias, and so that could be a sign. Oh, that's all right. That's all right. No, I've been heckled. So as I say, sometimes people can sort of think, do I need to go to the doctor, or is just a normal part of ageing? Another thing that I will direct you to is our Diagnosing Dementia, which is a practical guide to assessment. So it tells you all about what to expect, but it's also got quite a useful section at the beginning, which is comparing normal signs of getting older with dementia. So as we age, our memory does become less reliable. That's a fact. But it's when is it something to worry about more than aging. So, for example, taking a possible sign of aging is taking longer to work out new tasks, how to set up and use a new appliance or a device. So you get a new phone, it's going to take a bit longer maybe to sort everything out on it. Whereas for somebody with Alzheimer's or vascular disease, for example, you'd probably be unable to learn a new task like setting something up. You'd need a bit of help with it. So that kind of comparison. Possible sign of aging is losing track of conversation if you're distracted, or if there's lots of people talking at once. That would be normal. But a possible sign of Alzheimer's or vascular dementia would be that you're regularly unable to follow a conversation, even without distractions. And sometimes that can also be a hearing loss issue. So I'd encourage you to also think about hearing loss at the same time as you're thinking about these possible symptoms. I think there is someone here today who can tell you more about hearing loss and getting that tested. Getting confused about the day or the week, but figuring it out later. So often when you're on holiday or you've just retired, you can think, oh, what day is it? That's normal, but if you have dementia, you might completely lose track of the day, the passage of time even. So I would say quite a good little guide to look at to advise you on thinking, is it aging or is it something more? So as I say, the checklist is a good place to start. The practical guide to assessment also very useful. I would just say that the reason we're trying to get people to think about their brain health more and get an assessment as soon as they are worried, really, is for many reasons. I guess you may or may not know about the new drugs that are coming onto the market. There are some drugs that now can strip the brain of the toxins that are making the changes. So there is some hope. At the moment, the drugs that are available on the NHS are just for symptom management. So they can work very well for people, but it's the same as if you break your leg, you take some paracetamol to ease the pain, but it's not fixing the broken leg. Whereas we've now got some disease-modifying treatments that are available. At the moment, they're not available on the NHS. They haven't been. They're not financially viable. But there is lots and lots of trials going on, and it's very hopeful that there will be eventually a drug that can actually change symptoms so that people will be able to function as well as possible. But you need to have diagnosis early on, because once the damage is done to the brain, that's it. So if you can get your diagnosis in early, start on these new drugs when they become available. That's why we're kind of trying to promote early diagnosis. Does that make sense?
Is there a new test for early diagnosis as well?
Is there
a new test for early diagnosis that's come on recently?
Well, at the moment, what happens is if you have, I mean, I would always suggest filling one of these in initially if you've got concerns. Go along to your GP. Your GP needs to rule out other things that could be causing this. So that's why your starting point is your GP. Because sometimes it could be, it's not the dementia that's causing the problem. It could be a thyroid issue. There could be other things that could be ruled out. So you'd have blood tests. Your doctor would do like a mini sort of memory test to try and see if they have concerns. If they have concerns, if you hit high enough, they would then refer you to the memory clinic in Trafford, and then they would do further tests. And usually if it's Alzheimer's, there is a drug, as I say, to manage the symptoms, but not.
All of that doesn't detect very early onset Alzheimer's or dementia, does it? Isn't there a test, once you've been through that route, once you've done the MRI, once you've been assessed by the memory clinic, and you realise there's something wrong with you,
Yeah.
there's another test, isn't there, that can help very, very early onset dementia. I think is it a blood test?
Yeah, that is in trial at the moment. So that's the blood biomarker test, which has been funded partly through the People's Postcode Lottery. So if you play that, then you're making a difference. And it would be a blood test that would show that there were things going on in your brain that meant you were likely to develop Alzheimer's. I mean, they are testing other dementias as well, but at the moment, because Alzheimer's is the most common, that's where all the money is being spent. So I'm thinking it's possibly 5 years off when that will be rolled out across GP clinics, but certainly that would be an amazing change.
Again, that's something that's available privately, I believe.
Not sure if it's available privately. I mean, as far as I am aware, it's still in trials, but I know in other countries, in Canada, for example, they are using it, across their equivalent of NHS. So I can't see that we're far off that coming into play. And the hope is, of course, that you might go for your annual health check, maybe in your mid-40s or 50s. Go and get your blood biomarker test. If it indicates there's a problem, you can start off on these disease-modifying drugs that would stop it and nip it in the bud before it ever does the damage. But for the moment, that's not available. But that's the great hope, and that's why we're trying to change the mindset so that people don't feel there is a stigma to having something changing with their brain, and that they actually go and seek help. Because hopefully, I mean, in the past people have said, well, what's the point of getting a diagnosis, because there's no cure, there's no treatment, why would I want to know? And we want to change that, because it's important that you do get your diagnosis so that then you can start on changes. I mean, also when you get a diagnosis, you need to know what type of dementia it is. So you need to know so often people might be told it's dementia, but it's not specified. And I think we need to change that as well. So you know whether it's Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia. And I should mention that on average it's taking, at the moment, it's 2.2 years from noticing changes to getting a diagnosis. So that's quite a long time, really, where more damage is occurring in the brain, isn't it? So, and if it's young onset dementia, it's 4.4. That's double. It's longer when you're younger, because quite often it can be put down to stress, anxiety, menopause, all of these things that.
Cognitive impairment.
Sorry.
Cognitive impairment.
Yeah. So I think that's why we sort of promote this, because it is actually endorsed by the Royal College of General Practitioners. So it's the kind of information that they would relate to, and if you filled it in, if you're affected by it, if it's impacting your daily life, and how long it's been happening, it's quite a good starter to say, well, I've got this evidence, have a look at this and let's have a discussion. I would always say take someone with you to these appointments. Yes, because of the memory loss issue, you might not remember everything you're told, but also because it can be quite emotionally upsetting if you're hearing things that, you know, it's good to have someone, you can then block things off, can't you? So it's good to have someone with you that can be your memory at that moment, or, you know, be the memory for somebody else. I should mention also, Home Instead have got a nice little list of things that if you're visiting parents, or, you know, you things that you might notice around the house that might be an indicator of memory issues or possible dementia signs. So that's another one to have a look at as well. But certainly that would be your starting point. The other thing I would mention that is very difficult is when people have what's labelled apathy. So that can be that somebody who maybe used to have certain hobbies, things that they were very interested in, and suddenly they withdraw from them. They can't be bothered going out. You know, things that used to bring them a lot of joy, not interested, which can be a sign of depression, but it is also a symptom of dementia, especially Alzheimer's. And it can be very difficult also to get someone to go to the GP if they have this apathy or denial. Well, we don't always call it denial, it's more like a lack of insight. It's one of the symptoms, it's the way the brain is affected. For some people it is denial, that they just don't want to think about it, it's a coping strategy. But more likely it is that the person just isn't able to see the changes, and it's the carer that notices, and it's having more of an impact on the carer than the person with dementia. So in that case it's very difficult, very tricky, but what you can do, if the person will go to the doctor for other reasons, is to have a conversation with the GP beforehand and just express your concerns and ask if they can bring up the subject, do their little mini test in the appointment which you've arranged for some other reason, you know, under the pretext of going for a health check or some other reason. So it can be just getting the person to the GP, and then the GPs are usually very good at introducing the topic and just saying, oh, we'll just do this as well while you're here. And then that can be a starting point as well. But I know even some people won't go to the GP for anything, and in that case it's likely that you won't ever get a diagnosis, so then it's up to family carers to put steps in place to kind of minimise risks. Right, I don't know how long I've waffled on there, but I will just also introduce reducing your risks, which is just a useful thing to think about. As I said, we really do want people to think about their brain health the way that they think about their heart health, and reducing your risk is quite a good way of just thinking about things like protecting your head. I know it's obvious, but if you're going to do extreme sports or cycle, traumatic brain injuries can start a process in the brain that can make that substance that causes Alzheimer's build up around that injured area. So that's an easy one to protect yourself from. We still don't quite know what the long-term dementia risk is in contact sports like rugby and football, but I know that's something that is still being researched, and I know they are kind of changing things so people aren't doing all the kind of constant headbutting. What's it called? Not headbutting. Heading the ball. So they're not doing constant practice of that because it could cause damage. The usual things that we talk about: what's good for the heart is good for the head, the brain. So it's your diet, not smoking, not drinking very much, not having a lot of sugar. Anything that can avoid diabetes is going to cut down your risk of getting vascular dementia. You want to get the blood up to the brain, so some research has shown that aerobic exercise has actually increased a part of the brain which is responsible for making memories. So if you can get your heart rate up safely in exercise, that's a good way to go too. And as I mentioned, get your hearing checked, because I think it's like 8% globally of dementia could be avoided through hearing loss and treating the hearing loss, because apparently what happens when you start not hearing very well is that you tend to withdraw because you don't want to make mistakes and you're frightened of looking silly, getting the wrong end of the stick, and so you can start to withdraw. That means that your brain isn't exercising as it normally would by having that contact with people and chatting, and so then it can lead on to dementia. So what we're saying is make sure you get your hearing tested, because apparently something to do with having a hearing aid can improve the elasticity of the brain, so that it does mean that you are still taking an active part in all your socialising, the things that you like to do, and that helps the brain. So that's a simple thing that you could look into. Making sure that you monitor your blood pressure, all those things that, the things that the cardiovascular system is obviously the thing that you want to look after, so that you're avoiding strokes. Good news is that things like socialising is good brain exercise. So you don't have, it's good to do all your little brain puzzles, and those are all really good at keeping that cognitive reserve there. But also just talking to people is exercising your brain, because you're thinking about what you're going to say, you're thinking about how they've reacted, judging what their body language is telling you. That's all brain exercise, and then you're thinking, what do I reply to that? So that is all really good news and fairly easy way to exercise that brain. So I'm just going to leave some of these here, and does anyone have any particular questions? Yeah.
I would like to know, have you come across somebody with dementia that is very young? What age are we talking about?
Well, we class young onset dementia as below the age of 65. But you can get it very, very young. I know someone who's 33 who's had it, and they are talking more about children's dementia now as well, aren't they? We wouldn't support with that, because the person has to be over 18. But yeah, there is childhood dementia as well. I don't really know much about that. Yes.
What?
Yeah.
You did talk about denial and stuff like that. So if you are a carer, how do you cope if you see your parents being in denial?
Yeah.
They don't even want to get tested, and you brush it off.
Yeah, as I say, it's very difficult.
It's not say they have to be the ones to do it themselves. So what's the strategy for that?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult situation, because unless you've got sort of, you can't make them do something that they just don't want to do. Sometimes you can have a conversation and just be very open and reassuring with the people, and sort of, we're not doing it to interfere, but I'm just worried about you, and maybe give a couple of examples of what's worried you, it might not work anyway because they won't remember that example that you're talking about. So it then comes down to, as I said, can you get them to the doctor under a pretext for some other health issue? Mention it to the doctor beforehand. You obviously, if you don't have power of attorney for health, there's certain things you can still tell the doctor things that you're concerned about. The doctor doesn't necessarily have to tell you anything, but you can share information with the doctor. So then it's up to the doctor to do whatever they can. Quite often the doctor might not be able to persuade them to go to the memory clinic either. So in that case, as I said, it's just a case of the family putting things in place as much as they can. So it could be that you need to, get things that will stop if they leave the tap on. It's going to stop a flood. There are devices and things you can get to make the house dementia friendly and safe. You might have to just do that in the background gradually, so that you know that they're safe, and then encourage them to do things. But that's all you can do, really. You can't force somebody to do something they don't want, and that could make it worse actually, because they could get very distressed and then not want to see you anymore. You don't want that. You want to keep the communication going, don't you? So it's difficult. We do have a fact sheet about lack of insight, denial, and what family can do. So again, I'd look on our website for our fact sheet on that. But yeah, sometimes it's about being very adapting and being very, not sneaky, but doing things so that somebody won't maybe notice and get upset about it, but you're doing it in their best interests. And sometimes if it comes to a situation where the person is in danger, then it's when you have to get social services involved for a best interests meeting, and they might have to then put things in place to protect the person. But I mean, that's maybe a long way down the line for somebody with dementia who's never had a diagnosis. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Is there any medication for vascular dementia?
With vascular dementia, they will normally look at the cardiovascular system, and it's things like getting your blood pressure right and blood pressure medication. So it isn't something that's for the dementia, and quite often people with vascular dementia won't be given the same drug as someone with Alzheimer's, because it's different, and the brain is affected differently. So what works for Alzheimer's may not work, it wouldn't work for vascular. But then some people do have mixed as well, so they have some Alzheimer's and some vascular dementia, and obviously the GP would have to look at, the memory team would be looking at what would work for that. But vascular dementia is one of the things that, it is lifestyle related. So if somebody can get on top of their cardiovascular health, that will really help.